Good afternoon to America and good evening to the people of Harare, Zimbabwe, where joining us today is Bernard. Let's see, your last name is Mutemasango, correct? And he's the head of the Zimbabwe, what is it, the Zimbabwe New Democratic Change, right? Hello?
New Zimbabwe Democratic Change.
Okay, so the NZDC?
Yes.
Okay, and we're reacting, we're getting your reaction today about the recent events in Zimbabwe and their significance, given that it's hard for us in America to think of having the same president for 37 years. Some people can't accept that we've had the same president for 1 year here. And you guys have just gone through 37 years with Robert Mugabe. So please describe to me, first of all, what is it you do? What does your party stand for? And we'll get to the recent events.
All right. Thank you very much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my views and to introduce myself and my party. I'll start with myself. My name is Bernard Mutemasango, President and the founder of New Zimbabwe Democratic Change. Zimbabwe Democratic Change is a youth-led political party. It is led by me. I'm a youth. Our vision for Zimbabwe Democratic Change is to bring Zimbabwe to have a one nation which is built on freedom and fairness and opportunity for all, young and old people. So I'm very hard right now with the issue of our Zimbabwean constitution that will not that doesn't allow the young generation to participate in the running of the president's office. So we are fighting very hard on that issue. We want to have a constitution and that will allow the youth generation to be part of the whatever program the Zimbabwe government will be doing, the presidential, the senators, any office.
Okay, so I just try to speak like as loudly as possible because the microphone doesn't quite carry everything. But let me hear from you. How old are you, by the way? You look like you're in your 20s or 30s.
Yes, I'm 24 now.
34?
Yes.
Okay, can you describe the day last week when President Mugabe stepped down? What was your experience? Were you expecting him to actually resign, or did you think that he would stay in power until the end and they would have to force him out?
Actually, I can say it's a wonderful opportunity for us Zimbabweans, especially the citizens who are not in the government. It's a privilege we have because every citizen in Zimbabwe was afraid of this man. No one could stand against him. I think you had some news, you saw it on news. Sometimes we have got this human rights activist by the name Even Mawarie, who was arrested when he was trying to share his views to the nation of Zimbabwe. President Mugabe to step down was arrested because of that. So it's a wonderful thing that they have done for us so that we can experience the new Zimbabwe, we can enjoy our country once again. For 37 years. And out of those 37 years he ruled, with anything to say that this was done by Mugabe regime, instead of looting state resources, doing corruption, and killing people. That's what he was doing only. So as for us citizens, we celebrate that and we are in support. And we thank the General Constantine Chiwenga, the ZDF commander, and the opposition parties who also contributed in this solidarity march. We thank them so much. They are like you can say they are our guiding angels. They have come to our rescue after 4 decades of colonial under our same government, under the same race, black to black, colonizing each other. So it's a great opportunity for us.
So it's very interesting that you say it that way. I think a lot of Americans, we got used to looking at most of Africa as kind of this, it's a continent that most Americans don't visit. It's a continent where we, especially in the Congo, where we're used to reading about a lot of horrible, horrible acts of brutality and massacres. But Zimbabwe was technically liberated in 1980 by Robert Mugabe. Can you tell us, first of all, are you from the Shona or the Ndebele people? Which one do you belong to, or one of the other groups there?
I'm from Shona.
So President Mugabe, he was also a Shona. Do you think that he really, as I've read that he did turn the two main peoples of Zimbabwe against each other, as he did in the 1980s while eliminating his opponents? Do you think that there is going to be a hard period of reconciliation after Mugabe because of the Gukurahundi?
That issue of Gukurahundi, that issue of reconciliation between the Ndebeles and the Shonas, it's a very tough issue right now to touch on, but I will try my best to touch on the best that I have. Because if you take a look at our recently for our new president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, when
Can you still hear me?
People like hello?
Yeah, I think you lost connection for a second. Can you repeat yourself? Also, just try to like kind of speak as loud as you can, because it still is pretty light.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying
That's good.
the issue of reconciliation between the Ndebele and the Shonas. That one is still a bit tough right now, looking at the current situation in Zimbabwe right now, because there is a difference between the blacks and the Shona and the Ndebele because of this issue of Gukurahundi. We have people who are also asking about the same issue about the Gukurahundi, what is going to happen since we have the new government right now in place. So are they going to touch on that? So I had some people, they were saying it's not going to happen. They're not going to touch anything. They're not going to arrest anyone about that issue, because it involves a lot of top officials right now, including the president, the new president who is in power right now. So I think what we need to just do right now as Zimbabweans is just to unite together, and we forget about the issue of or culture, whether you are in the Bele or a Shona. I believe we are one nation. To be one nation and build our nation together so that we can achieve our goals.
Okay, so let me step back into the past, if you'll let me. There's an issue where Zimbabwe was a colonial possession for many, many years. I believe, it was subjugated by Cecil Rhodes and the British Empire. And what happened was that a number of white British settlers, they came to populate Zimbabwe. They built the modern capital of Zimbabwe, called, at the time it was called Salisbury. Now it's called Harare. They called it Rhodesia. Rhodesia was actually two parts. There was Southern Rhodesia, which is your country, and then there was Northern Rhodesia, Zambia. And then, of course, there was another part called Nyasa land, which is now the modern country of Malawi. And then in, I believe it was 1963, the British Empire was dismantling its colonial possessions, and they decided that they would grant some autonomy to the nation of Rhodesia, and they were going to keep a minority white government in power. But eventually they decided, no, we're not going to support a minority white government as there is in South Africa with apartheid. So Ian Smith is the most famous figure of that period. He decided that Rhodesia would become independent with or without British support. So how was your family's experience under Mr. Smith's government? Do you think that he tried to make Rhodesia a country with two different types of citizens? Do you think that in retrospect, the type of government that he formed, it gave the groundwork for what Robert Mugabe would end up doing when he took over?
Yeah, looking at the old time when Rhodesia was when Ian Smith was in power, I can say, comparing with the Mugabe regime, I can support the regime of Ian Smith on other things, um, because if we are to take a look at our regime, ZANU-PF, which was led by Robert Mugabe. Since that time when we got our independence, uh, things were moving much better until it came a time when they started to invent into the farms, taking the farms from the white men and giving it to the black men. And if we take a look at those people who were getting those farms, these are people who were not even educated enough on how to handle a farm. How do you manage a farm? These are people who just came from colonial into a farm. Now they want to take over the farm. And at the end of the day, we found out that things with the economy began to go down since that time. Until the white people, they begin to take their things and they leave our country. They left our country. They went to Zambia to invest, to farming there. And from that time, our country became, our economy was really bad. And so during the time, yes, during the time of Smith, I can't say he was right. It's not good to, especially when it comes to racism against the black people, because we believe that, especially us as NZDC, we believe that color, what matters is we are all human beings. We should treat each other with respect, whether you are black or white. We believe in one nation, one people. So this thing of Ian Smith, it really affected our people to the extent of they don't want to, otherwise try to talk you hear a lot of criticism. People will begin to say, you want to colonize our country again. So it's something that touched very hard on people's minds, and it's really affected them. So I can say, yeah, oh, it's right now, looking at our economy right now, I think it's better now to accept the white people back in our land, because we are now educated. Black people now are educated. Even the white people, they know that the black man is now educated. There's no way you can colonize the black man again in this generation. So right now, what we are crying for is for the new government right now to consider the white people to come back into the land, come back into those farms, because we have got army generals, we have got government officials who are owning 5 farms per person. And we have white people who are out there who are able to manage those farms, but they don't have saying to the government. Let these white people come back in our land, and we work together with one love to rebuild our nation. You see, we need to change our nation. We need to start creating jobs for the youth. We need to create jobs for our people, so that our people who are living in diaspora will come back home and start to invest in their country. The lives where I was in South Africa. I was in Cape Town. Um, I was touched when I saw the kind of life Zimbabweans are living in South Africa, especially in Cape Town. Homeless Zimbabweans. We have got blind people, blind Zimbabweans who are going to Cape Town, all the way from Zimbabwe to Cape Town, to go and beg on the streets of Cape Town. I was so touched when I saw that. These people, they deserve to stay at home. They deserve to benefit from the government. The government should look after them. So we are trying right now that this new government will reconsider the white people to come back. And if it is possible, we have to compensate those white people who lost their inputs during the time of land grabbing. I think they need to be recompensated, and then we start to rebuild our nation together.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking to Bernard Mutemasango from the New Zimbabwe Democratic Change. And we're reacting right now to a once-in-a-lifetime, for some people, event where President Mugabe, Robert Mugabe, stepped down from power last year. Just a couple comments in the chat. We're joined by Sandy and the rapper 10,000, who's one of my usual people who joined. And Sandy just said that she got home from church. Zimbabwe is a country that has a very strong connection to Christianity of different denominations, and based on the research I've done. Tell me, what was it? I know that the person who was before Mugabe in power, Bishop Muzorewa, he was a Anglican bishop. What was the status of the church under President Mugabe? Was he somebody who infringed on the freedom of religion?
I beg your pardon?
So Zimbabwe has a long and deep connection with a lot of Christian churches that came there to perform missionary activities there. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Mugabe himself was an ordained minister. So what was what was the status of the churches under Mugabe? Was he somebody who interfered with the freedom of religion there?
Yes, somebody who take a look at Mugabe. He was a Christian man. His policies, they are all based. If you take a look at even the manifesto of ZANU-PF can tell you that all their policies in our constitution, they are based on Christian.
Okay, we're having trouble with hearing Bernard, but I'll tell you that I heard him say that in ZANU-PF, ZANU-PF is the ruling party of President Mugabe, former President Mugabe, and the new president Emerson Mnangagwa, and he said that in their own manifesto, the party is based on Christian beliefs. Is that what you said?
Yes, yes.
So you've President Mugabe was in power your entire life. Can you tell me, based on based on your experience and the experience of other people who lived there, maybe your parents or your uncles and aunts and other people, how did he change as a person? I remember when I was a kid, there was a song by Bob Marley, Zimbabwe, where he was celebrating Mugabe's liberation of Zimbabwe. How did it happen that he went from being this hero for people not just in Zimbabwe but around Africa and even into the African diaspora in America, and he became this tyrant? What is it about him that changed?
You know what? Looking at Mugabe, the time when we get our independence, Mugabe was praised by a lot of African leaders, especially in Africa. They all praised him. They say he's a hero, a legendary man in Africa. But it came a time when I remember in 2008, I think in 2000, in the year 2000, when our economy began to go down and people were now crying, they say, I think it's time now for Mugabe to step down, give someone to take over so that maybe we can see a change. So since that time, that is the time when Mugabe and his crew, his ministers begin to from the state looting the resources. We have got the issue of Chiazwa diamonds. All those diamonds, they just disappeared without any trace. We have got 15 billion, which was just disappeared without any trace, and no one can voice against it right now because everyone is just afraid of their lives because we have a bad regime.
So about the issue of the white farmers, you brought it up. Can you still hear me, by the way? Because you're cutting in and out. Bernard? Hello? Let's see if he has to reconnect. For those of you that are just joining us, can you hear me?
Yes, again.
Yeah, you kind of lost connection for about 20 seconds. So I know that it's kind of tough to keep the topic organized because there's so many ways that we could go down. Like for example, I did want to get into the Gukurahundi, but I'm sure that I think I'd like to find somebody who was like around during that time. But I did want to ask you. You did mention something very interesting that I'd heard people think this. I didn't think that it actually was true. You said that you would like the white farmers to come back to South Africa, to Zimbabwe, correct?
Yeah.
So I did see, I think you also shared something earlier, I looked for it too, that the new president, Mr. Mnangagwa, has officially invited some of these people back and said that he will compensate them for their confiscated properties. I do want to ask: is it the fact is why is there not somebody, if not the people in charge now? How come there are no people from Zimbabwe, the Black Africans, that can manage those farms? Why is it that you do need those people to come back? Bernard, hello. We are getting some pretty bad connection here. Let's see if he can hear us, because I can see his screen froze up. Yeah, he's not.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, did you hear the last question?
Yes. Again.
Yeah, can you start over? Sorry.
Yeah. Can you repeat what you were saying, because I lost connection?
You need me to repeat it?
Yeah, I repeat it.
Okay, so I was asking, you said earlier that you might need that the president wants the white farmers to come back. You think that it's a good idea too. Why is it, do you think, that there are no people in Zimbabwe, the Black Africans of whatever tribe, of whatever nation over there? Why? I mean, I know the people currently there who are owning the farms are not competent, but a lot of these white Zimbabweans are pretty old. How can you expect them to come back and manage these farms? Don't you think that you should try to develop some of the local people and have them manage it as well?
Uh, yeah, what you said it's a very good contribution. Looking at the current our Zim ex farmers, if you take a look at them, some of them they are old. They just need to rest now. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say let's allow even those white farmers who are still able to do farming in our country. Let's allow them to come back into our land. Let's give them full land, the farms. Let them do whatever they can do with those farms. At the end of the day, we are the ones who are benefiting from that farming. Our economy will rise from that. Because I don't believe that a country can be built by black. We need the white people, and we put our brains together to come up with one good thing, build our nation. So I think this thing of racism against the white people, I think it should stop right now in this new government we have. And I'm begging to our new president that he must also address this issue. Talk, yes, we have to remember our history, what happened in the past, but allow our past to judge our future. We can't live this kind of a life where we only guide our principles on the past, affecting our citizens in Zimbabwe right now. Because I heard people saying Zimbabwe will never be ruled by a person who never went to war, who never a non-liberator of our country. I heard people saying so, but I don't think that's a good thing to say, because what happened during the time of Robert Mugabe when they were fighting for our country, yes, it happened, and it ended that time. For the future of our generation, our kids, they have to live a good life. We can't continue to keep our families uh, in an old regime. I believe we have to build a new regime right now. We have to, I think the president mentioned something very interesting about the compensation of the white people. And I believe it's a very good thing. And I believe that he's going to do, we need to compensate these people because most of them, they lost everything. Because our black people, they just getting into farms, they invent everything, they take everything. They just say now you take your things, take your beds, and you go leave everything. So I think compensation must be done, and it's a very good thing. On that note, I salute the president for that.
Okay, so another issue that is coming up, and I hope we can keep the connection because it kept it's been solid for a good 2 minutes, but it keeps coming in and out. But let's keep going. President Mnangagwa came to power thanks to the military with I think his name is General Constantino. What's his last name? Sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah. Constantine Chiwenga.
Chiwenga. Yeah. So one of the issues that is going to come up is if Zimbabwe can transition to democracy, as happened in South Africa for a while, which it's also in danger of losing its democracy over there, or whether President Mnangagwa is going to be the same type of person that Mugabe was. Do you think that the military will try to help restore democracy, or are you thinking, as I've seen other people say, that it could be the same problem? Mnangagwa has a history. He was active in a lot of Mugabe's more brutal acts of civil terror. What do you think, based on what you're seeing in the past few days? What's the course that you're seeing is going to happen?
I think the Zimbabwean army right now, if we take a look at the things right now, the way it is right now, and what happened, it's going to affect especially us as the opposition parties because it's now clear that the army it now belongs to SANU-PF. It's no longer an army for the nation, to protect the citizens of the nation. It's now clear that our General Constantine Chiwenga is a ZANU-PF, is a full member of ZANU-PF, to his speech, according to his words. So we are afraid that even if we go for election in 2018, as he said the army will never, ever in this life salute a person who never went to war to liberate this country, which means party, it's a no-go area. We are not going to be in power unless we change, we do a reforms in the army, in our security system. We need our national security not to be a partisan security. We need to do reforms there. I believe that since we now have a new president, I think our opposition parties like MDC, they are going to highlight those things. They are going to change the constitution. We are afraid in 2018, this thing is going to happen again. Even if MDC won the election, the army will not allow it to happen. They will come and they will take over like what they did recently in Mugabe to resign. That's the same thing they are going to do because they are the main people who also contributed in 2008 when Mugabe won, when MDC won the election. They are the ones who are on the main page to rig the election and to bring fear to the people so that they won't say anything against that. So we are afraid that Zimbabwe open our eyes right now. We might experience another 40 years of colonial regime by black people. And I'm afraid that the new government we have might rule us for forever right now if we don't act right now. Right now, we are asking for United Nations to come in the questions. That's our cry right now. Yet we know that the Zimbabwe government will not allow it, especially ZANU-PF. They will never allow it because it's a clear answer that the 2018 election ZANU-PF might lose, but they will not allow it.
Okay, so there's a lot that he said there, that Bernard said there, that will seem a little unfamiliar to the audience. So what you have to understand if you're watching at home in America or the United Kingdom is that Zimbabwe, since the mid 80s when Mugabe consolidated power, it's been virtually a one-party state. And the party is called the Zimbabwe African National Union Popular Front. And the main opposition party for the past, I want to say 15 or 20 years, is called the Movement for Democratic Change. And in 2008, as Bernard described, Bernard, can you still hear me? Because I think your camera is frozen. So we'll try to get back with him. But the Movement for Democratic Change won the election in 2008. But what Mugabe did was he stripped the parliament of any powers. And he basically ruled the country as a tyrant, the same playbook that he implemented in Zimbabwe was later taken up by the leadership in Venezuela recently. For those of you that are familiar with the Venezuela series, the parliament over there was also stripped of its power. So, and Bernard, you can let me know if you can get reconnected anytime, because I see that you can't. Can you still hear me? Hold on. His icon flipped. So when he comes back in, I'll let him come back into the chat. The thing with the recent coup is, like Bernard said, President Mnangagwa, the new guy, the new president, was one of the main lieutenants for Mugabe for decades. He was the vice president most recently. He'd also been at a certain point one of the main military leaders. He was a key functionary during the Gukurahundi, which was Zimbabwe's purge in the 1980s against the Ndebele people and their dissent. So what does this mean, that there's a coup and you basically put in somebody of the same characteristics as Robert Mugabe? Well, in a lot of communist countries, that actually happened pretty often. And it doesn't necessarily mean positive change. So it happened in Romania a few times. In fact, when Romania's communist dictator fell in 1989, he was replaced simply by a junta, that they kept the communist government in charge, and they just put in a more mild form of government there. And eventually they just expired. Eventually, Romania did have democratic elections, but it's not guaranteed to happen, especially not in Africa. So let me see if Bernard can reconnect with me. Can you hear me, Bernard? I think he's still connected in some way, but not quite. Let's see if he's trying to contact me otherwise. Also might have lost his battery. Said his battery was a little low too. So in the meantime, I'll look at, I saw there are a couple comments in the chat. The rapper 10,000 says, speaking of Venezuela, is there still protests against the socialist government there? To my knowledge, Venezuela is kind of fatigued. It's gone through as many protests as it's going to have recently. The problem over there is that the government is pretty well entrenched now. And as bad as they're performing, they are basically, they're held up by the Chinese and Russia. And I have a message from Bernard that he did lose connection. Try to come back. What many of you should understand is that, yes, there can be popular revolution in a lot of these countries that brings down a dictator. And technically that's what happened in Zimbabwe, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the government that comes into power will be responsive to the public. I'll give you some examples. You can look at the Philippines. The Philippines had a dictator in the, I'd say probably until 1985. His name was Ferdinand Marcos. He was a US-backed dictator, and he was overthrown by the Aquino family. The Aquinos came to power. They were just ineffective, so they weren't able to bring any real competence into government. I mean, they were less brutal, they were less despotic, they weren't as oppressive as the government of Marcos, but eventually they had to give way. I think they were replaced eventually by one of the military leaders, Fidel Ramos. Another example would probably be Fidel Castro, who came to power by overthrowing another dictator. So when we see a dictator fall, it doesn't always lead to a transparent and democratic form of government. And I think that we're looking at somebody, if we can get it back, Bernard, he's living at a crossroads where he doesn't know if his country can actually transform into the type of society where every citizen has at least some input into the administration of his country. Okay, and I think that, and I hope some of you find the irony in it, he's looking at the main hope to be white farmers that left Zimbabwe because Mugabe kicked them out. Think about that for a second. This guy, this guy believes that it's not the Zimbabwean youth that are the key to forming an inclusive and participatory democracy. He thinks that, unfortunately, it's a bunch of older, in some cases, nearing the end of their lives, white farmers that need to come back and reform Zimbabwe. Excuse me. You guys probably were getting used to the smoother vocals of Bernard instead of me, Mr. Coal Miner here. But one of the problems was this. Okay, and I'm gonna be freestyling on that, and if we can't get Bernard back within 15 minutes, I guess we're gonna have to call it a day. He just messaged me again. Let me see if I can add him again. He should have been able to reuse the link. So we'll see if he can come back. But in the meantime, one of the problems with Mugabe was that this was a person who had an abiding hatred of anybody that would get in his way. It wasn't just the white farmers, but it was also the Ndebele leadership. I'll show you, for example, one of them, his name was Joshua Nkomo. And this was during the Cold War. So think about it this way. Zimbabwe, until last week, was ruled by a Cold War era Maoist style dictator. He didn't impose communism to the letter in Zimbabwe, but his system of government was very similar to to Mao in trying to create almost this certainly a cult of personality. This was Joshua Nkomo. Joshua Nkomo was the main rival for Mugabe. Now, he wasn't an angel himself. He was known to have blown a civilian airliner out of the sky at one point. So we're not talking about somebody who necessarily was going to lead Zimbabwe towards democracy himself. But what you see in many of these communist states is that whereas they try to maintain this veneer that they're bringing about a more democratic, more participatory state, the dictatorship of the proletariat, as they call it, where all men are equal and that it's for the many and not the few, as Jeremy Corbyn in the UK calls it. Or, you could talk about Bernie Sanders saying that healthcare is a human right. In most of these countries where they implement socialism, what happens is that when they actually do reach the heights of power, these people that believed in all this sharing of power and sharing of resources until then realize that cooperation only goes so far. So if you look at Afghanistan, Afghanistan went under a communist revolution in 1978. And I believe the person who came to power, his name was Mohammad Taraki, who did not go hard enough towards radically changing Afghan society. So he was murdered by his protege. His name was Hafizullah Amin. And he himself was also killed and overthrown and replaced by Babar Kamal with the help of the Soviet Union. So, and then Karmal. So do you realize how this was during the Mugabe era, when Mugabe was coming to power in Zimbabwe? Afghanistan was going through a kind of a similar era, and you just had dictator after dictator just be replaced, and the person who came in their stead was also some sort of brutal communist despot. And it's a sad situation. I think that we can only hope that Mnangagwa breaks the cycle of brutality that we've been seeing. Somebody did try to contact me. Let me see here. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be able to come back. I don't know what's going on here. Just so you know, I mean, we were supposed to start at 12 Eastern time, and it was a huge, huge, huge pain in the ass to get to be able to connect to either of these guys. They both have kind of choppy connections. One of them, the person that you saw, Bernard Mutemasango, is in Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe. The other person is in South Africa. Couldn't even he a couple times was able to get at least on screen his icon, but we couldn't connect with him at all. So if anybody has any more questions in the chat, if not, I'm going to freestyle for a few more minutes, and then we're going to call it a day. What we're talking about here is a huge problem that people attribute only to race. And let me make it clear that even though Bernard was trying to say that they need the white farmers to come back, I think that in reality, look at who Zimbabwe was using to manage the economy until now. It was the Chinese, and it still is the Chinese. If you were wondering, the Chinese still have a major stake in Zimbabwe's economy, and we're going to have a very serious problem unless the United States encourages, our own businesses to go and invest and talk to these people, find out if they do have industrial talents. Then Zimbabwe is going to be going through a long and dark period where they're going to be a puppet country of China, or they're going to sink into some sort of wild period, the same as Mugabe did during the 90s. The Rapper 10,000 says, do you think the problem with these types of governments are these conflicting ideologies getting in the way of what is best for their people? Yeah, I would say that when you have an ideology that concentrates a lot of power into the hands of an executive, then it becomes almost the goose that lays the lead egg, if you want to put it that way. They can't get anything right. There are exceptions where you have what they call benign dictators. Mexico had what they call the benign dictatorship for about 75 years, but it wasn't truly a dictatorship. They would replace the guy every 6 years. It wasn't democracy, and it wasn't totalitarian. You could criticize the ruling party. I mean, it wouldn't get you anywhere. You'd pretty much have to worry about getting a job, and you could only, especially if you wanted a government job. So yeah, when you put into place an ideology, especially one that's socialist and totalitarian, you're going to get a huge amount of suffering because it's inflexible. And I'm working on a project relating to that, by the way. But it could be, it doesn't necessarily only have to be communism or socialism. If you have one of these religiously fanatical states like Spain in the Middle Ages, Spain became this crazy like Catholic fanatic society, and even though they developed this huge empire, it was just inflexible, and they would conquer and basically subjugate all these people. And then the Spaniards who would move to the New World, they would realize, well, we're just these pawns in the hands of the king over in Madrid, and we can strike out on our own. And that's how the Spanish Empire fell apart. That's kind of why the British Empire wasn't able to maintain the colonies. Now, I think that if you compare them one to each other, the Spanish Empire was much worse at managing its territories than the British were in the New World. That's why America developed into a more free society. And if you look at a lot of these states in Latin America, especially if you look at Peru and Chile, they've never truly transitioned into a society where democracy is secure. So Zimbabwe has an even steeper climb. The reason that I say this is what Bernard was saying when he was on the air. And unfortunately, when you remove a colonial leader like Ian Smith, who tried to rule Zimbabwe as a racial, he tried to keep white rule and keep the black general population out of power. Well, unfortunately, Ian Smith created the conditions for Robert Mugabe to come to power and abuse both the white and the black people. So you can't lay it all in the hands of Robert Mugabe, because if there had been no Ian Smith, if Zimbabwe had been granted independence as a country where there was one person, one vote, where black Africans and white European Africans were given one person, one vote, it's possible, no guarantee, that it would have developed into a participatory democracy. Now, there's Zambia to the north, apparently is, in better shape. They never went through that stage where it was a minority white government, independent. I think I actually saw this article. It's from, I guess I'll have to click on the Al Jazeera article, which is kind of funny, but Al Jazeera is one of the most racist news outlets that there is, in my opinion. They'll hate anybody that gets in the way of Qatar. But here, I'll show it to you. It says, white farmers thrive in Zambia years after driven from Zimbabwe. One of former President Robert Mugabe's most controversial policies was a land reform program of 2000, which made it legal for black Zimbabweans to seize properties from white farmers without compensation. The policy was meant to consolidate his support, but resulted in thousands of white commercial farmers being driven off the land. They sought safety in neighboring countries such as Zambia, where their skill and experience has had positive results. So this is a video. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show video on Hangouts with volume, unless somebody can tell me how. But the issue here, in my opinion, is that when you emphasize race and identity as part of your politics, this is something I don't think that the Rapper 10,000's question really addressed. When you emphasize race and class and identities, and you merge them with policies, then you get a huge problem. Because like Bernard was saying, a lot of these properties were given to cronies of Robert Mugabe or just other other Black Africans that did not have the necessary agricultural managerial experience to run these farms. And then what happened? They lay fallow. They basically, the machinery was not updated, so they couldn't even be farmed modern in the modern sense. And then it fell into disrepair. And what happened was that Zimbabwe fell into a number of famines. I think the most major famine was in the 90s. Let's see here. Looks like I can't find it here. But Zimbabwe was once known as the breadbasket of Africa. It was a huge wheat producing region. We have here from 2016, February 15th, 2016. This is from the Daily Mirror, which is a left-wing paper in the UK. It says Zimbabwe declares emergency as famine leaves millions hungry after months of drought. Okay. So President Robert Mugabe has made an urgent call for foreign aid with low rainfall leaving livestock wiped out and farmers facing disaster. So, here's that image of a, livestock that can barely keep, they can't even keep upright. Bernard just said his network isn't working. So we're just going to continue solo from now on. I don't think I'm going to continue for very much longer anyway. It says more than 2.4 million people in rural areas have been affected due to exceptionally low rainfall over the last year, leading to the death of thousands of cattle. So essentially, and you can see here his face, he had that uber Hitler mustache, by the way, Robert Mugabe, one of the most cartoonish people that you could see. Let me see if he says he's back, but I don't see him back. Yeah, he says he can come back. But I don't think we're going to go for much longer anyway. I'm going to answer this one question from the rapper 10,000. If I can get back to the page. He says it is funny that people here in the States, mainly liberals, love these socialist and communist ideologies, even though there are examples of their failures. Corruption is just one of them. So I think Bernard's back. Welcome back, Bernard. I'm just answering a question, and I'll get right back to you. But I don't think we're going to go for much longer. So, okay. Yeah, with these communist ideologies or socialism or even just concentrating power at the top, we see in many cases they just put incompetent people in charge. And Bernard was saying earlier with these people that Mugabe put in charge of the farms, it's possible that he could have found people that did know how to run the farms back in the 80s, but he didn't. He gave it mostly to people that were loyal to him. And you see that in many, especially with and that's why I hate it when people say it's an African issue. Of course, in African countries, you have this pretty often, but this is exactly what Stalin did. This is exactly what you see in North Korea. You see it in countries like Cuba, where the brother of the dictator became the new dictator after he stepped down. One more thing, we got Augusto Pinochet, who's well known here. He says every time socialism is implemented, people pay a huge price, and authoritarian regimes rise to power. So we're going to close soon, but Bernard, your party, obviously you have a lot of competition now And of course, there's the ZANU-PF. They have unlimited power in Zimbabwe right now. What are you able to do personally and as a group in order to help transition Zimbabwe towards a democracy?
As New Zimbabwe Democratic Change, we don't believe, in fact, I can say we don't believe in the transition government they are trying to make in Zimbabwe. Because what we know that this transition government, they're doing it just to keep them in power during the next election in 2018. We already see the plan they have. That's why they want to introduce this transition government. And this transition government, it's not going to benefit all of us. It's going to benefit those who are on top in government already. The likes of, we've got the new coming Vice President Kamo Mohadi, the likes of Morgan Changirai, who is going to be nominated to be the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, the likes of Chamisa, Nelson Chamisa. So all these people who are going to be in this transition government, the ones who are going to benefit, not the whole generation of Zimbabwe. And this transition government cause problems for us, because what we are saying, yes, we have changed the president, but the main problem, it wasn't about the president Robert Mugabe only. It was about the president Robert Mugabe and his regime, which is ZANU-PF, which is still in power today. You see? So what we are calling for, we are saying new government, not new president. New government to take power, and then we see whether it was the problem of the president or what. It was a problem of the regime, or it was a problem of sanctions which are placed upon us. Because we have got so many countries who are under sanctions, but those countries, they are developing even right now. So I don't think the main problem here is about the sanctions. The main problem here is about the regime that is ruling the country. We have got the same people who are right now, we are saying they are in the new government in New Zimbabwe. We are trying to rebuild now, right now. These are the same people who have been working with Mugabe for the past 4 decades. They have been working hand in hand with him, doing all the kind of corruption with him. And these are the people who are on the top on the main road to do corruption. If you look at right now, if you look at the new president Emerson Mnangagwa, he was recently, he was, before he was elected to be the vice president of Zimbabwe, he was the minister of defense. And these are the people who were killing people, who were beating people during the 2008 election. They went to villages, they were beating people. If they know that you are an opposition supporter, they will beat you. Some of them, they were killed. We have got brothers and sisters who were killed. Our fathers, they were killed in 2008 with the same person. This is the same man who was plotting the disappearance of all the human rights activists. We have got the Zimbabwean journalist by the name who was Itai Dzamara, Itai Dzamara, who was disappeared, and there are no traces. Where is he right now? We just hear Itai Dzamara is just disappeared, and no traces up to now. And no one is able to stand against these people, because this is a dictatorship. You see, these are people with powers who are holding the powers in Zimbabwe right now. If you say anything against them, within 24 hours, you are gone. You see. So we are saying we need the new government. We don't want the change of of the president, but we need a new government. ZANU-PF must just rest right now, must allow other people to take part, must allow other parties to lead Zimbabwe. And then we'll see from there whether it was a problem with the regime or it was a problem with sanctions. We believe that with sanctions, we can still move our country forward. But the problem, we've got people who are looting in the government, who are contributing to the downfall of our economy.
So Zimbabwe, for many years, it's been influenced by China. It's been before that was influenced by the United Kingdom. There are people who think, and there's been reports that China helped overthrow Mugabe in order to put into power somebody, I guess, a little more compliant to their wishes, which maybe Mnangagwa would be an example. If you're looking at the international community, Bernard, and you see Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, or any other country, would you say that they should urge Zimbabwe to liberalize elections, end this one-party state, and then end the sanctions? Or do you think that there isn't really a way to exert pressure on Emerson Mnangagwa to do it?
What I think right now, if you take a look at what is happening right now, the current situation, the United Kingdom, they sent their Prime Minister to come in Zimbabwe during the inauguration of Mnangagwa. I think what they are trying to do, the reason why they pushed Mugabe to resign, it was because so that the Chinese right now. I want to start with the Chinese. Chinese, they are there in our country and they are investing in our country. And they are the other people who are also looting economy from our government. They are looting a lot. They are taking diamonds every night. Diamonds are taken crossing borders, the borders from Zimbabwe going to South Africa every night. So these are people who are pushing for their wishes to come to pass, because if you take a look at Mugabe, Mugabe was refusing these people to take ownership of, especially in our land, to take ownership of our resources, such as diamonds. Because these people, they are only after our diamonds. They are after our gold in Zimbabwe. So this is what Mugabe didn't want. That's why he had to be hard-headed, and then that's why they had to throw him out, and they pushed this new president, so that whatever they have agreed with him, it will come to pass. You see, so looking at the current issue right now, I think it doesn't help us Zimbabweans to remove a dictator, and then we replace the dictator with another dictator again. We are not going anywhere. Otherwise, we are going backwards instead of moving forward. So I think the whole system right now, they are trying to create of a new government, policies. I don't see it helping Zimbabweans, because already there are rumors right now moving around right now all over social media, newspapers, that they were saying one of the ministers, who was the Minister of Finance, Chinamasa, he mentioned something during the Solidarity March, saying that this Solidarity March, it wasn't made for the people, for the opposition parties, but it was made for ZANU-PF. You see, we don't need the opposition party. We don't need your contribution in this new government we are about to build. Even if people, they say it's a lie, but it's something that no minister can say something like that. Yet he knows that they didn't even discuss anything about that issue. Discussed already, but this minister, he just rushed to say it in public. but it was meant, it was already discussed, they are already planning it already. So we are seeing this as a fight that is going to fight us tomorrow, 2018 election. They are going to fight us very hard when it comes to election. Because they are trying to make sure that the main points, points, they are going to fuel their people there. The election, whatever happens there, maybe ZANU-PF will lose the election. They will also rig the election, just like what they did in 2008. Mugabe, for your own information, in 2008, Mugabe wanted to resign, but they had to force him to take part, to continue leading the nation by force, because they knew that if he steps down, if he let Morgan Tsvangirai takes over, all these people, these government top officials who were working with Mugabe, they're going to be arrested. And Mugabe was not going to be arrested because of his age. These are some of the things they are trying to hide so that people won't say anything. Looking at right now they've elected Mnangagwa, and we have got the issue of 15 billion right now, which is still on no one is saying anything about the 15 billion. And the main man who is behind this 15 billion is the same man who fighted Mugabe, who fighted Mugabe to resign. Our commander, Constantine Chiwenga, is the man who is behind this, and this new president. These are the men who are behind this 15 billion. You see, so these are people who are trying to hide their things, what they did, their corruption. They are trying to hide it. Now they are fighting this group called G40, because there was a team called the Team Locust, and the G40, it was for Grace Mugabe. So the ministers for G40 right now, they are in hot soup right now. With of Ignatius Chombo, who is under police custody right now. They sent him to prison yesterday. He's saying the looting in the government, they were misusing the office of government. So these are people, they know that if we let these people, if we leave them to be free, these people, they might come against us and they might put us in trouble, because these are people who have all the information on what was going on in ZANU-PF during the time of Mugabe rulership.
So one of the people that I noticed, I think over a year ago, was agitating against the Mugabe regime was Evan Mawarire. What role do you think that he can have in maybe changing society, maybe encouraging the military to devolve some of the powers and take away some of the powers from ZANU-PF?
Even Mawarire right now, I support that thing. He's a man with a great vision, but his vision is limited by the ruling regime. They won't allow him to express what he to share with the public, the rest of Zimbabweans, what his real vision is all about in Zimbabwe. Because whatever he shares with the public, they always come after him. Because this man, he might change something. He's a man. He's that kind of a man who speaks and people, they will react immediately. You see, so they are trying to shut him down, so that people will not say anything, will not stand for their rights in Zimbabwe. So I think Zimbabwe right now, we need just to change the government. Sick and tired of ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF, there is nothing they can promise our citizens. There is nothing they can change in Zimbabwe. because they have already failed for 4 decades right now. They failed to change anything, even if Mugabe was in power and ruling alone in ZANU-PF. They were helping him to rule Zimbabwe. So these are the same people today who are coming to us saying we are going to get. This is a fake thing they are trying to do. This is all fake. It's just trying to, because remember we are towards the election. So they were trying to get people's hearts so that people will vote for them. Soon after election, you will see they will go back to the same ideology of Mugabe, because ZANU-PF will never change its ideology. They will never change. If president is elected, they will never change. It will still remain the same. They will still remain. They will still rule under the same ideology of Mugabe. It will never change. They are just doing these things for election. You see what will happen. You know these people already.
Okay, so we've gone, I think, about an hour or more. I want to thank Bernard for joining us today. I know it was a very rough ride, being able to just get the connection. So I want to close and give a little hope. President Mnangagwa did ask for people to come back. He asked for black Zimbabweans to come back. He asked for white Rhodesian Zimbabweans to come back. There's going to be, obviously, there's going to have to be some sort of change in order for Zimbabwe to get its sanctions lifted. And I think that we're living in an era right now where, at least, I'm speaking as an American, and people are complaining here about our president becoming a dictator. Well, there are countries where they're just trying to figure out how to emerge from dictatorship, and the Zimbabwean people, remember, they never had a country in modern times that had representative democracy. They've had white minority rule, they've had black minority rule, and I think that we've had our Thanksgiving holiday here in America, which probably isn't common to most of the world. I think in Canada they have it too, and we should be thankful that we do have the opportunity to make at least some change. There, of course, and I complain about it all the time, we have imperfections in our democracy here, but you can see Bernard, he's living in a country where people, they don't know if there's going to be hope at all tomorrow, and they really don't know if they're going to have a chance, even with the change and the exit of a 93-year-old dictator. Because if Mugabe had died in office, Bernard, as president, do you think that the people of Zimbabwe would have gone along with the public celebrations, or do you think that there would have been a change anyway?
Yeah, I think there would have been a change, because as soon as Mugabe, if it was to say die in the office, we are soon going to go to the election immediately, and people will. Right now, we know that in come 2018, to win resoundingly, we're not going to allow it. If it was to say Mugabe was going to die in the office, it was going to benefit us as an opposition party, because we already know that people ZANU-PF, they don't have people's heart at all right now. There's an added advantage for us, but right now, looking at the current situation and what they are trying to do, equalize the people's minds, they are trying to get into people's minds so that they think that people will think that these guys, they are going to change everything in our nation. But yet it's not true. This is just for the political campaign, for the election campaign in 2018. Soon after election, you will see they are going to shut down everything. They are just doing it for the election. So it was an added advantage for us. If it was to say he dies in the office, yeah, we're going to know that 2018 we are going to win.
Okay, so I want to thank Bernard again for joining us. We have a lot of well wishes. Augusto Pinochet says, God bless Zimbabwe. There are millions of freedom-loving peoples wishing you all liberty and happiness. And Catherine says, thank you. And then Sandy Thomas says, good luck, Bernard. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, prayers for your country. And I'd like to say also, I've been following your country probably for 10, 15 years about, with Mugabe and with Smith and Nkomo and with Changarai. And at least this is a change. We don't know if it's the change that's needed, but if something new happens, don't be afraid to reach out to me or send us a message, and we'll try to have you back. And you can communicate with us. I'll try to put you in touch with some people with even more of a platform that can get your message out. And I guess it's still Sunday, so have a great evening and stay positive.
Thank you very much for this wonderful time you've given me to share my views with the rest of the world. I believe that what I have shared right now, people who take it seriously and who consider it for the benefit of our future children. We need a new Zimbabwe. We need to change our future. We need to create jobs in our nation. So let us not be played with this dictatorship. Let's think right now. It's time for Zimbabweans to open our eyes so that we can see what is happening right now. Let's see what is happening. Let's make the wise decision when it comes to election in 2018. Let's make the right choice. Vote for a change. We don't want to be under this leadership again. They have failed us for 37 years, and it's enough now. We need change. We need new government, new policies. Thank you very much.
All right, and that's good. Have a good night, everybody, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.